What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another episode of Free Mind Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Hurt, and I'm joined today with a guest. And pretty cool story. We actually met, was it yesterday or the day before? Was it yesterday?
I think it was yesterday.
Okay, yeah, I know it was quick. So we met on
Yeah,
Instagram, and we were just kind of going back and forth on a few things, which we'll get into later in the show. But basically, I was like, "Hey, how would you like to come on my podcast?" Because you had some interesting things to say, and there are several key aspects of your story that I thought would be valuable to listeners. So, without further ado, my friend, why don't you introduce yourself?
sure. So I run a TikTok page called Current Vents, like current events, but current vents, like I'm venting. I have an Instagram under the same name. TikTok's my primary platform, though. Definitely have more reach on there. Not ideal because TikTok is notorious for their censorship. Conservative Ant got taken down at 780,000 followers. Carson Wolf got taken down at 250,000 roughly. Ken Carson got taken down at 120,000. Like, I see it all the time.
Wow.
It's a very frequent occurrence. They definitely target smaller accounts more, but even the larger accounts, they're pretty merciless with. So it's not the best platform in terms of free speech, but I do like the platform because it allows you to reach a very large audience as long as your content's engaging. It really doesn't matter how many followers you have. You can grow your following really quickly on there if your content is interesting. They just care, is your content keeping people on the app? Sure, we'll feed it to more people. Whereas Instagram's more like, okay, you get a following and then your followers look at your content. So it's kind of reversed, which is nice, but the censorship is absolutely nuts. Like, you think Instagram's bad, like TikTok banned me one time because I was shirtless in a video, and they banned me for like sexualizing minors. And I'm like,
Oh,
wow, I'm
wow.
glad you think I look so young.
Yeah,
But
I guess it's kind of a compliment. Yeah.
yeah, I know, kind of a compliment, I guess. But yeah, at
Jeez,
the
man.
same, I think each one's like a strike against you too. So that does suck. But yeah, I've been permanently banned on there one time. I appealed it, and it went through. I got my account back, thankfully. But I get banned from going live all the time for the
Mm.
dumbest things. They don't even look into it. I had a picture of Trump in my background. I wasn't even doing a political thing. I was just like talking casually, not about politics or anything. I got banned for hate speech from going live for like a week. Happens like all the time. And
For
there's really not a great recourse system on TikTok.
for having a picture of Trump while you in the
Yeah.
background while you were
I was
banned,
I
you
was
or
doing
live.
karaoke with Trump. It was I
Wow.
was like, let's do karaoke with Trump, and I had a picture of Trump in the background, and I was just singing like Christmas songs, and I got banned for hate speech for a week.
Jeez. Jeez, man. Yeah, that's wild. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
shadow banned on Instagram right now. Like I'm constantly getting censored for various reasons on various platforms. I'm not on TikTok, but I've heard that it is pretty
Yeah.
bad. So what kind of content are you posting? Like, what is your messaging? What are you all about on those platforms?
So, I try to diversify it a lot. Like, I originally started very data heavy because I'm a very data driven person. Like, I went to college for economics and international business. So I wrote research papers all the time. So, like, that's kind of my mode of thinking. So I started really data heavy. Now I've tried to integrate some of the more like comedy into it, trying to use TikTok's all about using whatever the trending sounds are. So I try to sprinkle in comedy in there to reach probably like younger people. I do a lot of lives. My lives are pretty notorious on there, and people enjoy the lives a lot. And I think part of the reason is because the lives aren't just a conservative audience. Usually, the algorithm will feed your content to just a conservative audience. Your live engages a much broader audience because when people comment on it, it feeds it to people like those people. So all of
Oh,
the
okay.
haters that you get on a live, all the people and the comments aren't saved on a live. So it's like the Wild West. Like,
That's good.
even the poster, like the content creator cannot save the comments on a live.
Yeah.
So they go all out, and it's like it's very, very dramatic and like juicy, gossipy. So people love that, of course. And people just go all out in the comments. So that's a good and a bad thing. It's a good thing for engagement, but a bad thing in terms of how many people get to call me Joel Osteen during during a live.
I can see it a little bit. I can see it a little bit.
Yeah, I see it too, and I hate that.
So you gave yourself away a little bit there when you were saying that it's not just conservatives on there when you go live. So you are a conservative, essentially conservative personality, Republican, outspoken political commentary. I would say is kind of what your content tends
Definitely.
to be.
Yeah.
And you are.
I don't.
Go
it's
ahead.
hard to say conservative. Like I used to have conservative in big letters, like on my page, and like Conservative Ant does the same thing. You see conservative, like people who would not be considered conservatives even 5 years ago, brand themselves as conservative now. The label has really taken on, I think, a new meaning. But at the same time, I didn't want to kind of put a deterrent on people who might like have that association with like the old school conservative.
Right.
Because conservative's a relative term. It's like, what is the society you live in currently? Are you conservative relative to that society? So I would say I'm conservative right now. 5 years ago, no, not at all. But I do identify strongly with the Republican label.
I'm glad that you brought that up specifically, that the term conservative and the term liberal or progressive, they're dynamic. They're relative terms, because a conservative is someone who's trying to conserve the current values of that particular society, right? And my friends on the left, I affectionately call them, like, they lose their mind when I tell them that the goal of every liberal should be to become a conservative, because they don't understand the definitions of these things, right? So I'm like, you have all these progressive goals. The goal should be to achieve all those things. And then once you do, what do you have to be? You have to be a conservative, because now you want to conserve them, right?
Never heard it put that way.
Yeah. And so, I mean, really it just makes sense in terms of the definitions, right? Like if you achieve all your goals, at that point, you have to be a conservative, because you want to conserve those things. And so you and I got into
come up with that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Yeah, I've just
that's juicy.
Yeah,
that's juicy.
I actually I've had it right, like on the tip of my finger, about to tweet it, and then I was like, I don't want to get banned right now for because I just know that the comments would go crazy, and I'd probably get in some back and forth with somebody. But and sometimes you're just in a mood where you're not up for the exchange. I'm thinking about just dropping that bomb and just being like, the goal of every liberal should be to become a conservative, and then just walk away for a couple hours and just see what happens.
I wonder how they would interpret that. I don't
not the right way.
What you were saying immediately, but most people, like you said, don't really think of those terms as dynamic. Like people comment all the time. They're like, you can't be a gay conservative. That doesn't make sense. You cannot, by definition, be a gay conservative. And I'm like, conservative is a relative term. You absolutely can't. Like I'm much more conservative than most gay people. So yeah, I can be.
Right. And so that's another aspect of who you are, your brand, what have you, that you just brought up, that you are gay. And that's definitely something that I wanted to unpack. Obviously it's important to some of your messaging. Like I was watching some of your TikToks earlier, and something that you said that was really powerful was that you've had much more hate coming out as a Republican than you did coming out as gay. And so I'm really interested in diving into that. And I've heard that multiple times. And I guess it's similar to like Candace Owens, which she came out as a conservative to her black friends or whatever. They lost it, So I guess, first off, when did you come out? How old were you? And what was that like? If you don't mind jumping into that.
I have always been a bit of a firecracker. I grew up in a small town in rural Georgia. And so even in 7th grade, I remember, so before 7th grade, I was like a hardcore Christian. My family wasn't even as Christian as I was. Oh, wow. I got rides with friends to go to church because my family didn't regularly go to church. So I was like diehard Christian. The second we learned about evolution in schools, I was like, atheist, boom, done, atheist. Like I set up like at lunch, I would sit there and be surrounded by Christians just bashing me, like asking me questions. And I just would sit there and just like calmly like shut it down with like natural selection. That was like 7th grade. I gradually became agnostic pretty quickly. Now I believe in God. I'm always going some violent transformation. But similarly, in 7th grade, that was the same year that I realized I was gay. I didn't come out in 7th grade, but I realized it then. And I think part of that realization came with being more comfortable with the fact that, okay, I don't have this God that's going to like condemn me for it anymore. So like, I think that's what's happening here. Because I remember having crushes on like Anakin Skywalker when the 3rd Star Wars was coming out when I was like 8 years old. So like it was a thing, very much so. I just didn't really click that until 7th grade. So I gave it 2 years to see if it was a phase before I went ahead and reformed, I guess, my identity. And in 9th grade, at 13 years old in 2010, I came out of the closet and I lost like all of my guy friends. I no longer was invited to anything on the weekends. I still had like school friends at school. And to be honest, like I only got any kind of bullying interaction, harassment interaction was either someone yelling something one off in the hallway who I didn't know, or oftentimes it usually was when I was going to another school's party, and this was more junior and senior year. So think like 2013, 14, I started going to a lot of other schools' parties. Those schools were really bad. Like I would go to a party and someone would find out that gay kid is here, and the party, I am not kidding, would literally split into 2 halves. And the room would be like the half with me on it and the half of the people just looking over being like, holy shit, like that kid's gay. Because nobody had met a gay person. It was a very different time. Like people don't remember how different shit was before gay marriage was legalized and all these corporations hopped on the bandwagon. So I came out, 2010, age 13, and I wouldn't say the climate really changed until marriage equality passed. And then once that passed, things rapidly, like exponential change in acceptance. But really overall, let me turn my heat off before this, and it's getting hot in here. I would say that and surprisingly, most of it came from the gay community, was at least 100-fold worse than what I experienced as a gay person. And that's saying a lot, because I did get a lot of shit for being gay, but it wasn't like traumatizing. It didn't make me like wake up literally shaking with anxiety. Like all of the things that I experienced after I came out as a Republican, and I did so after the election, after Donald Trump lost, and I'm in Georgia. So I was like, okay, the Senate runoffs are really important right now. That's the balance of power in the nation. And Georgia is at the center of that conversation. So I was like, okay, I need to stand up and speak up because the runoffs actually matter. And I regret not speaking up sooner before the presidential election. So now I'll speak up. And so I did that. I released this giant essay with 23 sources, very objective, nothing fiery about it, nothing inflammatory about it. Very just researched. I wrote it like I would write a research paper.
That doesn't matter to people.
Go ahead.
That doesn't matter to people though.
Oh no, not at all. Especially at that time, because like even now, people are talking more, like exponentially more.
Yeah, that's true.
Now that Trump lost, like people feel more comfortable because no longer can people point to like, oh, like you support Trump, which like I don't care if people say I support Trump. I'm like, yes, I voted for Trump. Let's talk about it.
Right.
But so I don't care about that. But it's become a lot easier. It's still crazy how stunned people are to see like a gay Republican. But I think it's becoming less stigmatized gradually. But at that time, December of 2020 is when I did it. And it just blew up. The essay had, and I know this doesn't sound like a lot, but for my little Wix site that I had set up, I set up a Wix site so I could just publish something somewhere. It had like 1,000 reads on it. And I was like, I don't even know 1,000 people. Like, who are these people reading it? And I started getting all of this hate mail from anonymous Instagram accounts that were clearly gay people, because they would like insult my looks in a very catty way. I could just tell it was a gay person. I got anonymous messages on Grindr. I got anonymous fake matches, like with fake men on Tinder that were literally just fake men. Like, they weren't real. I was like, did you set up a Tinder and then swipe through the card stack until you found me?
Wow.
Because then they would like message me immediately about the Republican thing. They weren't real people. Like, I would look into, like, message my friends like, hey, do you know who this guy is? And the scene's very like, everybody knows each other. So it's like, these were just fake profiles. And the same thing happened on Instagram, on Grindr. It was absolutely insane. I was getting like 12 DMs from total strangers on a daily basis that were just paragraphs long of just like telling me how awful I was. At first, it was people I know. That was the hard part. Like, I lost all of my friends from college. Every single solitary friend I had in college, I lost. And these were people I was very close with. I went to Europe with these people. I went across the United States with these people. I made these people dinners in my home multiple times. I was always hosting things because I'm very like, I love hosting. I love entertaining. Lost all of those friends except for my roommate, and not just because she lives with me. She's actually, we're very like, we see eye to eye. It's not that she felt awkward and she had to continue being my friend. We see very eye to eye on things, and she's stuck by my side. But yeah, it was absolutely brutal. And yeah, I had never experienced anything even close to that in my life. And it was just pretty shocking. And like, I don't like to use the word traumatizing because people use it way too much, but I was waking up like shaking every single day. Like, I couldn't, like, I would pick up my phone and just be ready to see like tons of people I know talking about me on the internet, posting my face on their profiles, talking about me, saying horrible things, just making the most heinous accusations about my character. Of course, that I'm racist. Of course, like, oh, like he's harmed so many POC in his life. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? But anyway,
yeah.
And then I really didn't experience that again until I started doing the lives on TikTok. And then that brought in a whole nother wave of strangers, at which point that was another like shocking period. But that one didn't last as long because I was like, you know what? I'm fucking over it. Like, whatever, this is just the nature of this thing. And it just tells me how important it is that I continue to destigmatize. And that was long-winded. I'm sorry. But
oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. That was a great sort of walk through that process. I am curious about your political evolution, though, because prior to coming out as a Republican, and we can dive into identifying as a Republican versus a conservative and vice versa. But were you political prior to that? And if so, were you a Democrat? Like, were you actively, on the left, or kind of what was your politics like before that point?
I was intensely Democrat. And not even like, I wasn't like a Democrat in like the social justice sense. I've never been that type of Democrat. But I did, I just supported Democrats really because the two parties policy-wise did not look that drastically different until recently.
Yeah.
Policy-wise, really not too much of a difference. They both were like pro-business, pro-investment, reasonable with like progressive taxation, but not too egregious with it. Really, the main difference was a cultural difference.
Yeah.
And the environment. That was another thing that I cared about. So it was both the culture of the Republican Party being so like openly against gay marriage. I was like, okay, I'm a libertarian. I've always been a libertarian. And I was like, that's not libertarian. Like, that's saying the government should have a say in my private life, my private decisions. That's not small government. That doesn't make sense. And then on the environment front, it was like, okay, y'all really just pretend like nothing is wrong with our environment. And that frustrated me. So I was like, okay, whatever. I'm going to end up arguing with Democrats all the time. And I did. I was always arguing with Democrats, never really arguing with Republicans, even then. And when I did, they were so civil. Like, even when I was super, super just haughty and pretentious, and like, because like the Democrat culture, I do feel like can be like that. Like, you can be very like, assume moral superiority, you assume intellectual superiority. And I definitely was guilty of that. And I look back in disgust at like how I acted. And I've apologized to people since then that I acted that way with, but they were always super civil. And whereas Democrats, even then, were extremely vicious towards me whenever I would express like, oh, I agree with capitalism. Like, capitalism absolutely makes sense. And here's why. Data point A, B, C, D. They didn't care. They would just like call me a chauvinist, upholding the patriarchy, because I was all in like the indie scenes in college and like all the gay scenes and stuff. So those are all like the worst of the left. And so, yeah, I was a Democrat. I canvassed for Stacey Abrams. I'm ashamed to admit that I did that, because I think that she's a fraud now.
I was literally about to ask you what you think about her.
Yeah, I do not like her at all. I used to really respect her. I thought she was very like well-spoken. She seemed very pragmatic, and just willing to compromise. But as soon as I saw her tack on to this whole like Jim Crow 2.0 narrative, I was like, you're a fraud. You are literally just another politician that will say entirely unreasonable things for votes, because those Georgia election reforms were no different than what you see in multiple blue states. Those many blue states had already had those implemented. And it's like, you're going to call photo ID Jim Crow 2.0? Like, that's ridiculous. So that was when I lost all respect for her, like every shred. I cannot get on board with politicians who will say entirely ridiculous things. And they have to know. Like, she went to Yale. Like, you have to know that's ridiculous to say. But she does it anyway, because she knows it works. And that's shameful. So yeah, not a fan.
What was the turning point then for deciding decisively, I am a Republican and I'm going to let everybody know that, and, you know, let all the chips fall where they may? What was that point?
What was the moment?
Yeah, like, how did you make that determination finally?
So what really brought me over is probably the day that I went to a BLM protest. And I go to this protest, and initially it's fine. I brought a whole suitcase full of like snacks and waters to hand out to people. And I planned on handing them out to both the protesters and like the National Guard and police who were there, because I didn't like how much division was going on in that time. And then I just saw everybody break out into just like screaming matches with the police. Everybody started chanting, quit your jobs, all cops are bastards, fascists, just pigs, all kinds of just degrading, dehumanizing things to these police who had nothing to do with the George Floyd murder. Nothing to do with that. And these are just people trying to provide for their families with an honest job. They're either policemen, they're National Guard. And mind you, around 60% of the police in this city are Black. So you have a bunch of white liberals thinking that they have any justification to scream all cops are bastards at a bunch of Black cops. And I'm like, it's no wonder. I live in Atlanta. Atlanta has the crime surge that it does right now.
Yeah.
Homicides, I believe, were up as of June 2021, up over 60% over the prior year. And the prior year, 2020, was one of the deadliest years that we've seen in, I think, over 10 years. So what you're seeing in Atlanta is insane, because cops don't want to work here anymore. It's not a city where cops are respected, similar to other cities. So along with that, my parents are small business owners. So you saw all of the riots and looting total disregard for small businesses and businesses in general. And you saw Democratic leadership come out and excuse all of that, say property can be replaced, but lives can't. I'm like, okay, these people's property has nothing to do with the people's lives who are lost. So every time you're upset about something, you don't get to destroy someone else's property just because, oh, property can be replaced, but lives can't.
Right.
Very childish logic. And then the COVID measures came on top of that. The COVID measures were one of the most devastating things that's happened to America's working class in U.S. history.
Without a doubt.
We saw the largest drop in small business ownership from February to April of 2020 alone. We lost around a quarter of small business owners, and over 40% of Black business owners went out of activity. So people claim to care about Black business, yet over 40% of Black business owners lost their livelihoods because of COVID shutdowns, but nobody talked about that. That wasn't in the news, not interesting enough. So it was all of that, the combination of COVID and the whole like identity politics, violence, rioting, just total cult ideology, and kind of the umbrella over all of that. And what allowed those two things to fester was this resistance to free thought and free exchange of ideas, free conversation, examining data where data is relevant. I had a huge problem with the cultishness I saw the Democratic Party foster and really coddle and encourage, even like with all the rhetoric that all the Democratic leadership would call Republicans, like, oh, like this is like the worst thing that we've seen since Jim Crow. Like that's a horrible comparison to make. Yeah, and it's disrespectful to those actual like occurrences that occurred, to even compare like voter ID, for example, to Jim Crow. That's just it's a disgusting comparison to make. And it was just this cult, anti-free speech culture that developed. And I was just like, all of this is not okay.
Yeah.
And so I felt like the best way to hold the party accountable was to switch. And then I realized, I was like, holy shit, like I've been a Republican all along. I literally just wanted gay marriage in the environment. And now you've got Dan Crenshaw talking about nuclear. You've got Trump having a Pride Coalition event at Mar-a-Lago. Like those things are there now. So I'm like, I'm all in. Like I'm like very, very Republican, and I'm proud to say it at this point.
Well, the gay marriage thing is interesting too, because it's like I talk to people on both sides, and I can't remember the last time, honestly, that I talked to anyone who was like vehemently opposed to it, you know, and it wasn't even that long ago when Barack Obama was opposed to it. And it's like, things have changed so much. And when you truly separate out those couple things and look at how the Republican Party has evolved on those topics, it's like, oh, I can have all of that and not all of this crazy woke ideology and suppression of free speech and soft bigotry of low expectations for minority groups and, you know, everything that comes along with it. It's like, it's pretty convincing. And I think that, especially accounts like yours, where you're clearly just stepping out of an identity group that has traditionally identified with this one side, this one political party, and you're saying, no, look, guys, it's really great. It's not that bad. In fact, it's great. And here's why. I really admire you for doing that. And I admire the fact that you do put up with the pushback that you get, because you are also changing minds and changing lives. And there's no doubt about that. I mean, just like Candace with the Blexit movement and, you know, all of these folks who are really being brave enough to kind of speak up on that stuff. And why do you think, I wanted to ask you, because I'd like to have your perspective on this, and it's perplexed me too, because I have a lot of friends who are gay, you know, obviously we don't see eye to eye on some political things, but they're still my friends. They've been my friends forever. And a lot of them are from like when I was in grad school at Berkeley, you know, obvious reasons. You know, there were a lot of gay people in the San Francisco Bay Area, but they are, I mean, they just hate Donald Trump. They hate the Republican Party. And anytime I try to get into it with them and ask them why, there really are no reasons. There's no good reasons. They're just like, Donald Trump hates gay people, and like end of conversation. And like, what is that? Do you think it's like, why are they so reluctant to just examine both sides and say, well, hey, maybe actually it makes a little more sense over here?
Yeah. I think it is truly a 2020 in general was a spectacular example of the power of conformity, obedience, and groupthink. So you saw it even in the highest of academic institutions. The people who you would expect to have the highest degree of critical thought totally bow down and kowtow to the most ridiculous ideology I've ever seen in my life.
They're the worst ones.
I never thought. Go ahead.
They're the worst ones. Like, they're worse than the average person.
It's
yeah.
Shocking. It's literally, and it's just because the social fallout that you will get, and this includes people in academia, because they rely on social rapport within their circles, because that's how you get grants. That's how you get research grants. That's how you keep your tenure. All of these things rely on your social rapport within your in-group. Mm-hmm. Same thing happens with gay people. Gay people have an extremely, extremely strong sense of in-group. Like, there is I literally feel like my gay life and my straight life exist in almost entirely separate universes. Mm-hmm. Like, it is a whole different social dynamic of things that straight people would never realize are like happening at the same time, and it's like events that are like huge that no straight people are going to know are going on, and everybody's talking about it in the gay community, or like happenings. It's a very much an in-group culture, and when you divert from kind of the accepted norm of what it means to be part of that in-group, mm-hmm. you risk an incredible social fallout. And I experienced that firsthand. It was beyond anything I ever expected. I knew it would be bad, but it was genuinely one of the most inhumane things that's ever experiences I've ever personally had. And it's just because I diverted from the narrative that Republicans hate gay people. I'm a traitor because Republicans hate gay people. Donald Trump hates gay people. And that is a total media propagated lie, mm-hmm. an Instagram cutesy infographic propagated lie that people cannot refute with actual substantial evidence, logic, philosophy, because you can look at Trump's record on LGBT. And he said in the past, he did say, people like to bring this up all the time, he said he supports traditional marriage. But that was, first of all, in the past. Second of all, the actions that he took in his administration were so clearly pro-gay. He elected the first openly gay person to a mm-hmm. cabinet-level position in U.S. history. It was Rick Grinnell. People think it's Pete Buttigieg. That was the dumbest headline I've ever seen because, he got confirmed by the Senate. Yeah, that's the only difference. Trump appointed the first openly gay person to the U.S. cabinet, to a U.S. cabinet-level position. Trump also started a global initiative to decriminalize homosexuality across the globe after those two Iranian kids were killed for being gay. And then you look back, Trump was outspoken against Don't Ask, Don't Tell, a bill that Biden voted for. In 1999, I believe, in an interview, he was saying that there's no reason that gay people shouldn't be able to serve in the military. Trump has and in 2016, he was against openly while running as a Republican candidate against the Carolina transgender bathroom bill. He said, Caitlyn Jenner can walk in Trump Tower and use whatever bathroom she wants.
Yeah,
and people just ignore all of that in favor of the groupthink narrative. And I think it is literally just the fear of social fallout that keeps people from even entertaining other ideas, because it would sit so uncomfortably with them for them to continue living a life that they know is counter to the actual truth. It doesn't sit well with them, so they'd rather not know anything. So they don't look into it. They'd rather be part of the scene. They'd rather just blissfully ignore it and continue to have their gay little fun. And I think that's it. I think it's literally just, you don't want to lose your gay scene. And it's like, I had social fallout, but I've also gained a shit ton of authentic gay friends from that. People who are like, yo, like I really respect what you're doing. I know you're going through a lot,
Yeah.
but like we should hang out sometime. And I've gained so many real friends from that. And like I haven't been like totally eradicated from the gay scene. Like I'm trying to be an example that like, yeah, it'll be tough, but it's always tough for the outsiders. And the outsiders are the people who really drive progress.
Yeah.
So are you going to be an outsider for a little and be part of progress, or are you going to just conform even when the system isn't working?
It's been really odd to watch the right be the voice for not suppressing speech, be the voice speaking out against big pharma, to be the voice. Like it's like there's been this odd like shift in the social dynamic, and it's been crazy. And you expressed this sentiment, I think, in one of your TikToks, and you might have even mentioned it on here as well. But the folks on the right they're the nicest people. Like they embrace you.
Yeah.
No questions asked. Like I'm married to a person of color, right? And I mean, she's never experienced any kind of vitriol from anybody on the right. And if you were to ask your average run of the mill lefty today, I'm sure they would say, oh yeah, I mean, you guys live in South Carolina, your wife's a person of color. I'm sure that there's all kinds of racist Republicans who have, done things to her and said things to her. And it's like, no, not once ever. Yeah. And you go to events and it's like, they do not care. In fact, the beauty of a meritocracy or capitalism or any of these, free market systems, et cetera, is that they don't focus on immutable characteristics like that. Right. Yeah. And the Dems or those on the left or whatever you want to call it, I mean, that's like all they focus on now.
Exactly.
And it's incredible, man. And it really is odd to me that you can't even get through oftentimes. Like I was going to ask when you just laid out those things to me about Trump, for example, I was thinking to myself, I wonder if he's done it to a fellow gay person, and then what did they say? Like, how do they even respond to that when you just lay out all these very factual, pragmatic points as to like, no, he doesn't hate gay people at all. That's ridiculous. Or they just brush it off, or what?
So they usually just try to bring up something else negative that's similarly very vague and unsupported by evidence, like his rhetoric. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, what rhetoric? What did he specifically say that was so heinous, especially compared to the things that Joe Biden has said and is saying?
So many times.
Give me an example of something he said that was so outrageous that it just meant that you couldn't vote for a guy who was making policy that was really helping Americans. And they can never bring up specifics. Yeah. It's the same thing, that it's a stagnant conversation. And I've found, though, that most people simply tell me, I don't want to talk about politics. If I start bringing up, they just like, I don't want to talk about politics.
Yeah.
They're like, I really like you.
They're like, I can see that I'm losing here.
Yeah. They're like, I really like you. I don't agree with your beliefs, and I don't want to like talk about politics. I don't want to get into that territory. And I'm like, you don't want to get into that territory because you aren't confident in your beliefs.
Yeah.
I am. Yeah. And you don't want to confront that because you know you would lose.
Yeah.
Because I'm clearly very informed and passionate about these things, and you're clearly not. But your vote matters just as much as mine. And so I'm trying to have a conversation with you, and you're refusing. And that's what's so toxic about left-wing culture, is they really aren't interested in conversations. And to your earlier point, it's like, not only are conservatives more open-minded in terms of political discourse, but also just in general, like I literally could, so pre-2015 could have been a different story. Like in high school, sure. Like it was very much a half-half situation. Like I would say I come from a small Georgia town. I would say like 70-30. With young people, I would say 70, and not with females. With males, I would say 70% were cool with me. Like they didn't have a problem. 30%, which is a sizable chunk, would openly like avoid me for that reason. But even still, it wasn't like I was like suffering. Like I had a great high school experience. Like I was still pretty popular. I didn't like suffer for being gay. It wasn't crazy bad or anything. Nowadays, I have not met a single solitary country bumpkin who don't like me because I'm gay.
Yeah,
and I
dude.
say country bumpkin endearingly. I love my country bumpkins. They're like my favorite type of people. Country people are the fucking best. They're so open-minded. They're so fun and authentic and just raw and real. And they'll just have any conversation under the sun with you. Whereas when I'm around city people, it's such a performance so much of the time.
Yeah.
Like so much of the time, I don't feel like I'm connecting with the person, but rather the persona that they want to present to me, depending on what I like. Whereas country people, it's generally just a much more authentic vibe with them. Like I could walk into the most country damn bar in my hometown in high heels, and I guarantee people would love it. I guarantee I wouldn't get a single shred of hatred. If I walked in there with some high heels and a Trump hat, they'd fucking walk me out on a damn like royalty like chair and shit. Like they love gay people who are down to engage with them because they're so used to gay people who just immediately are antagonistic towards them. Like gay people, I think, have such a horrible view of what country people are like. And I'm like, that's just the furthest thing from the truth. And I'm so thankful that I have that background to know that these people are really some of the sweetest, most hardworking, humble, authentic people that I've had in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I grew up mostly in North Carolina, but I live in South Carolina now. And I've been in the South my entire life, except for 2 years in California for grad school, which, by the way, I would say I probably encountered the most divisive people I've ever encountered in my life during those 2 years. And and it's just, my evolution was very similar in that I just sort of honestly just stuck my head above the water one day and I was like, wait a sec, why am I even like this is awful over here. And if you're just honest with yourself and just say, wait a sec, that's terrible. What am I doing this to put on because I was part of the academic community, right? And like, and despite even the way I look, and it's just like, it was a known thing. Like we're Democrats, I was a scientist. And so
what field were you in?
Oh, sorry. Biochemistry.
Okay.
So
cool.
I did my undergrad in biochem and genetics, and then I went to grad school at UC Berkeley, and I was basically looking at how climate change is affecting gene expression in different animal species up and down the California coast. And
very cool.
All my peers were obviously very much on the left, and at the same time, most of them hadn't given it any thought. Is what I started to notice. They were just like, by default, we are Democrats because Democrats are good and superior and the smart people.
Yeah.
And I fell into that, man. I just bought it hook, line, and sinker because all I cared about was doing my research. I wasn't political. But then I started to, for me, it was a lot of these anti-science woke ideology principles. And I'm just like, man, I would see fellow former colleagues from that world starting to say things like math is racist. And I'm like, hold on a second here. Hold on a second. Like you clearly don't believe that. And you're terrified of being labeled a bigot that you're going to say that math is racist. Like, guys, use your brain, please. And that was a big part of it for me. I was just like, this is ludicrous, man. And they're losing everyone. They're losing everyone. Yeah. That's what happened in Virginia, So it's interesting.
I mean, thank God they're seeing some repercussions from it.
Quite a few lately. Quite a few.
I mean, and it's like this study that was conducted across, it was over 8,688. I have it in front of me because I have that paper in front of me. 8,688 tenure-track PhD holding professors from 51 of the 60 top-ranked liberal arts colleges. U.S. 2017 report found that the Democrat to Republican ratio was 10.4 to 1, and that 78.2% of academic departments sampled were either 0% Republican or at a proportion of Republicans that did not statistically differ from 0. And I'm like, if that isn't problematic to you, you're out of your mind. If you don't think, because people are like, oh, that's because Democrats are just more intelligent. It's the more intelligent policy.
No.
I'm like, there are brilliant conservatives, like Justice Clarence Thomas, brilliant. Antonin Scalia, brilliant. Margaret Thatcher, brilliant.
Thomas Sowell.
If you're going to deny that those people are brilliant just because you disagree with them, I mean, I have a serious problem with that. Like, that's intellectually disingenuous.
Yeah, and I think that the big driver for why Republican or right wing or conservative, whatever term you want to use, has such a negative connotation is that the left has co-opted basically all the major institutions, from the media to education, and it's weird. It's weird how sometimes I get a little like upset because I'm like, how the hell did the right let this happen? You know, why did we just not have any balls, or like what was it? You know, like why and how? Like, have you dove into that much?
Majority.
Yeah,
it was exactly that. People did not have balls, and you saw it play out in the demographics of the voters in 2020. Every demographic group you can think of, just about everything I can think of. Native Americans, 1 out of 2 voted for Trump, roughly. 1 out of 3 Asians roughly voted for Trump. 1 out of 3 Latinos voted for Trump. 1 out of 5 Black men voted for Trump. 1 out of 4 roughly LGBT voted for Trump. Yet you see white men decreased in their proportion of people who voted for Trump because they were shamed and bullied for 4 years into not having their own opinions. And so white men are the reason I think that Donald Trump lost, because they were the only demographic that Trump lost ground in from 2016. Every other demographic you can think of went up in its proportion of the vote. So that tells me 2 things. Minorities, a lot of them increasingly don't like being pandered to. They recognize what's happening. They recognize they're being pandered to. They recognize they're being infantilized and assumed that they don't have the cognitive capacity to make their own voting decisions by Democrats. And 2, that white men were bullied and shamed and harassed into not having their own opinions. So they just voted with what they felt like wouldn't make them feel like a bigot. And I'm like, that's the most shameful thing I've ever seen.
It truly is.
Voting, like a voting exit poll, that that's the takeaway I get from that. And I'm like, I hope that those trends, I hope that minorities continue waking up, but I hope the trend that white men are switching Democrat for no apparent reason. There's no policy basis that I can see that any rational person on this earth would switch from red to blue. I cannot see it at all. I have scoured the universe looking for all kinds of data. I've argued with so many leftists because I do debates too on my TikTok. So I've debated like the upper echelon of leftist debaters. It's always pathetic. They cannot explain why they believe what they believe. And they're used to meek, quiet conservatives that just take it. And just like, well, like, I don't want to be called racist, so I won't bring up this point. I'm like, I will talk about race all day long. I'm talking about data. And if you call me a racist for talking about data, you are the bigot, because the definition of bigotry is intolerance of opinions different from one's own. Yeah. You are the bigot. People forgot the definition of bigotry.
They've forgotten the definition of a lot of words, my friend.
A lot of words.
And I'm the same way. I do not. It's why I get shadow banned so much on Instagram, because I do not, like, race does not bother me at all. I do not care. Yeah. I will talk about any of it, and part of it is because I grew up.
You know who you are.
I know I'm so confident and firm in my beliefs. Yeah. And I grew up literally the only white kid in an all black neighborhood. I'm married to a brown person. If you're going to call me a racist, then I can't even take you seriously. Like, it does not bother me in the least. Right. And so, and of course, I was talking to Maj Touré, who's a black guy. He's a Second Amendment advocate, very outspoken libertarian. I had him on the show, and he's very in support of the black community in America arming themselves, exercising their Second Amendment rights. And it was funny because we were talking about all this stuff, and he was like, "But dude, I can tell you right now, people look at you, like people on the left look at you talking about me, and they're immediately like look at that guy. He's definitely like a racist. And I'm like, I do not care. I truly don't care. Are they going to say it while I'm out with my brown wife grocery shopping? Like, dude, it doesn't bother me.
And it's part of my mission to really destigmatize. And I know you don't take on the label, and we can talk about that if you want to, but
I want to. Yeah, I do.
It's a big mission of mine to destigmatize what it means to be a Republican, to be on the right side, to be of the aisle, to be country. I'm not country myself. I wouldn't consider myself country, but I'm from a country town. Like my mom and dad both have strong Southern accents. They used to be much stronger. But I mean, like I see all of these just really righteous, virtuous people, many of whom are much more virtuous than I am. Like I'm no saint at all. And I hate seeing them lambasted by some of the worst human beings I've ever known in my life. Like some of the most lazy, jealous, just pretentious. It's just like the worst people I've known. Some of them are just out here acting like they're the best thing since sliced bread and they can criticize anybody. And I'm like, this is flip-flops. Like this is not how, like, you should not be criticizing them. Not that they should be like demeaning you or degrading you, but like you're the one who's worthy of criticism if we're talking about virtues. And I'm like, the right gets just mudslinged like all the time. And I'm just like, there's no basis for this anymore. Sure, back in like the 80s and shit, you could talk shit about the right and I would be like, yeah, I probably deserve it. But nowadays, and even then, it's like a lot of conservatives were just totally decent people who wanted to mind their own business and they wanted the government to do the same. Yeah. So it's like the right has always gotten this reputation and the media has always highlighted the worst apples of the right instead of highlighting the general trends that we're seeing on the left. Like it's not even like the people they highlight on the right are always like exceptions to the rule. Whereas like on the left, like I see a trend of like intolerance. I see a trend of hatred. I see these trends of like laziness and entitlement. Like these aren't just one-off things. Like these are things that I've noticed as very discernible trends. But it's like, how do you quantify that? That's just a human experience.
Right. Well, I can tell you that, and another part of my political awakening, and we will go into the Republican title stuff, but for me, when I went really viral with my first post holding up a sign, and it was a very unifying message. We can disagree and still be friends. And the amount...
I remember that. I remember when I saw that.
Yeah.
Because I knew I recognized you. And I was like, you've posted the free speech or hate speech isn't speech that you don't like, or speech you don't like isn't hate speech.
Yeah.
I was like, is that the one I saw? Because like you had just posted it, wondered if it was a repost. Okay, that is the post. Yes.
Yeah.
That went hella viral.
Yeah, it got shared a few million times on Facebook, and I mean it was all over the place. But I was shocked because the reason I made that post was, and I draw a lot of parallels to what you did, where you wrote your article. I made a video because at the time I was doing a lot of fitness content. I was nutrition coaching. I was putting out tons of workout videos and stuff. And it was the beginning of COVID, and I got a bunch of DMs from people asking me why I wasn't wearing a mask in the gym. And so I put together a video explaining the underlying science. I cited studies, and I know a little bit about this stuff. It's like what I've done my whole life. Yeah. And I got I lost clients. Friends blocked me. It was my first experience with cancel culture, quote unquote. Yeah. And that's when I made that post. We can disagree and still be friends. And I just threw it on my Facebook, hoping that some of my former clients would see it, because I'm like, guys, this is ludicrous. I'm trying to help everyone here. But what I was going to say, to your point, is that all of the lambasting, negative, vitriolic, just awful comments on that post, which was unifying, they were all from people on the left. All of them. And they were calling me like a white supremacist, or just, all kinds of terrible things about how I looked. And because I'm a white male, I'm an awful person. All these things, they were all coming from people on the left. And they didn't know me, obviously. They just saw a white man, and that is the enemy, and we have to attack. And they assumed that I was this, stereotypical meathead guy,
And the
whatever.
beard,
All
like,
of it, all of it. And that to me was very telling, just like what you were saying as to sort of the difference in morality between the two sides. I was like, man, these are some awful people saying some awful things to a person they don't even know.
And a lot of people see it, because that was your most viral post, and my most viral post was similarly me calling out the Democrat Party for fostering a culture of hatred and intolerance. Because I spoke on my experience coming out as a Republican was infinitesimally worse than coming out as gay in terms of the backlash that I got. And that's what a lot of people are seeing, that and waking up to that. And it shows, because that was your most viral post. That was my most viral post too. So it's not like we're alone in this realization, and I'm thankful for that.
No, I think that there's been equal parts the left driving people away as the right attracting people. I think the left has really done a great job of driving sane people away. It's absurd, man. And but no, I was just completely attacked for saying let's all get along. And that's when I was like, okay, what is going on here? What is happening with our society, with our culture? And that's when I started really getting into this stuff and start, because just by nature, I like to examine things, pick them apart, figure out that's why I like when we were DMing, I started asking you questions. You were like, hey, I wasn't trying to, argue with you. And I was like, no, I'm not trying to argue. I'm genuinely curious. But yeah, so it's just wild. And you asked me, because on my profile, I say politically homeless and I don't identify as a Republican. So to answer that a little better, I've never identified with a political party. I never called myself a Democrat. I never have called myself a Republican. And that's rooted more so in just, I'm not a fan of the two party system. I'm not, I have beliefs that kind of fall. I definitely fall on the right with most things. Some things are more in the center. So I just consider myself more of honestly, it used to be a classical liberal, but now you use the word liberal and that has a different connotation. But I believe in just like, leave me the hell alone, protect my rights. And that's it. Keep the government out of my life. And so I'm not opposed to, and obviously I vote Republican most of the time on most things, just because I just fundamentally, and it's probably just an issue with me, I hate like categorizing things in broad generalizations. And so, I like to say I vote for the human, whatever party they're in, I don't care. Like I like Tulsi Gabbard for a number of reasons,
We all love her.
Right.
Everybody. I have never met a Republican who doesn't love Tulsi Gabbard. My dad is the most diehard Republican. Actually, I'm probably more diehard now.
I was going to say it's a close one.
But we love her. She is the most pragmatic, pure human being I have ever seen in my lifetime in politics. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And if she ran, though, I've wondered if I would vote for her, not because I don't think she would do a good job and she would make sound policy, but because as a Democrat, she's expected to act in line with her party, and her party is so out of line right now. So despite loving her that much, I don't know if I could give the Democrats that power over the country, because they have shown themselves to be so irresponsible and drunk, frankly, with power.
Well, she's been very outspoken against her party in many ways lately, especially.
She is not the establishment.
No.
At all.
Well, that's why that's why the DNC shit on her in the primaries, the fact that Joe Biden chose Kamala Harris instead of Tulsi Gabbard, she checked every intersectional box that you dum-dums care about, and by the way, she's a veteran. And by the way, she's much more measured, likable, well-spoken, has better ideas.
Isn't she Native American or Native Hawaiian?
Actually, no. I'm sorry. So she's Hindu, religious wise, but she is, I guess, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander heritage.
Tulsi Gabbard is Hindu?
Yeah. She practices Hinduism. I'm 95% sure. Yeah. She's also a vegetarian.
She talks about God a lot, and I know Hinduism, I thought, has several gods, but she talks about God a lot. I feel like
I maybe fact check me on that, but I'm almost positive that she does, and I'm sure there's someone screaming at their
Yeah.
screen right now. But I know that
Irrelevant to me. I don't care.
yeah, yeah. But my point is, if you're looking for someone who checks all these intersectionality
Yeah.
boxes, like she was the girl, and
Yeah.
it was just because she wouldn't play ball with the establishment that they blackballed
Yeah.
her, and Hillary called her a Russian spy and all this
Yeah.
stupid shit. It was just absurd, man. And
Joe Rogan's talk with her was great. I don't know if you listened to it.
oh yeah,
It was
yeah.
really good.
I messaged her a couple of days ago because she was in Fort Bragg, not far from me. Just through a Hail Mary, I was like, "I will drive to you if you'll be on my podcast." She didn't see my message, but
That's fair.
Yeah.
busy woman.
Yeah, I know. Well, I always preface things because I'll reach out to an outrageous guest every once in a while, just because.
Why not? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, and I've gotten some, but most of the time they don't even see it, right?
Yeah.
But I always preface it with, I know you're an extremely busy person. I love what you're doing, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's essentially why I just haven't taken on the mantle of Republican, and it's probably just a semantics game and just reluctance on my part. But I mean, I align with the party on pretty much all things, except for maybe some finer points of environmental issues. And it sounds like you and I are essentially very much in line with where we fall.
No, absolutely.
On most things.
I mean, I've noticed that, especially like as a former Democrat, like I'm a very pragmatic person. I'm not married to the Republican Party. I'm not married to whatever the Republican Party espouses. And I think people need to I think a lot of people think that when you're a Republican, you co-sign everything every Republican has ever done and everything that every Republican will ever do. And similarly, as a Democrat, people think, oh, you co-sign everything Democrats have done and will do. The difference is that there are so many Democrats who are willing to openly and like kind of vigorously identify as a Democrat, even though there's so many talking points that I'll bring up with them, and they'll be like, well, I don't agree with that. Well, I'm not like that far left. Well, I don't agree with this. So Democrats are very willing to take on the label, even when they disagree with 90% of the points I bring up. Republicans, however, will agree with 99, if not 100% of the points I bring up. And even still, they're like, well, I don't want to take on the label. And I'm like, this label doesn't mean that you're married to the party. And the best way to hold your party accountable is to leave as soon as they stop representing the values that attracted you to that party. You never will have, so long as these political factions are made up of imperfect human beings, you will never find a perfect party. So finding your party isn't so much about finding the party that represents the whole of what you believe, but rather what directionally represents where you want the country to be most. And I do find it important. I used to, in high school, identified as an independent, and then I went Democrat in college. But I do now find it important to identify with one. If the parties weren't super different, I would have a different opinion. But right now, I find the label important to destigmatize the Republican label and to provide a signal to other intelligent people to see, like, hey, this person is reasonable. They talk through data, statistics, and they identify as a Republican. Or for me, with like other gay people, it's like, hey, he's gay. He's like normal. He's not this stiff, weird guy. And he identifies as a Republican. And like, he's still alive. Like, he hasn't been cut out of every party that there is. He's been cut out of some, but not every.
Those people suck anyway. Yeah.
And it's just like, it's trying to send a signal to other people. And even with like people who disagree with like the duopoly altogether, like I've really thought through that. And I really do feel like having a dual party system makes the most sense, because I think inherently each side will always favor, one will favor left and one will favor right. And if we allow other parties to come in, depending on where they randomly fall, they're going to break up the left's agenda or the right's agenda, and that side will no longer be empowered to get anything done. So I think the reason we have two parties is because, say, if Libertarian became a popular party, I identify as a libertarian, but I would never support that. I would vehemently, actively resist that and openly resist the idea and reject that idea, because that would only break up the power of the right-leaning people. So it makes more sense, I think, to have a right-leaning side and a left-leaning side, because once you break things up into different interest groups, you're risking breaking up the possibility of the right to get anything done and the left to get anything done. So it's like, it's a directional thing. Someone made that bus stop thing, and it was usually Democrats that made this. It's like, Joe Biden may not be your perfect candidate, but when you have a bus and it's going somewhere close to your destination, but not to your destination, you get on that bus. You don't neglect to get on just because it's not going straight to your destination. You get on because it's in the direction you want to go. And that's how I feel about Republicans. And that's why I'm so proud to hold that label and advertise that label. And because frankly, I nowadays, I do not see Republicans saying things I disagree with. The only thing I can think of is this super, like the heartbeat bills, like the 6 weeks. I don't know that I'm comfortable with that. A woman has barely missed one period at that point. Now, 12 weeks, I could see that, because you've had 3 months to figure out you're not pregnant, to figure out the logistics to not get an abortion. And at that point, a fetus is highly developed. So I do see that. But beyond that, I really am not seeing much on the right side of the aisle that I'm just totally against. It's very rare that happens.
No, and I agree with you completely on that. And I apply that principle when it comes to candidates. There's no perfect candidate. I haven't found anybody that I align with perfectly, right? But I'll still vote for them, right? Like Trump, plenty of things that I don't like about Donald Trump, but I voted for him. It's just, for me, just the label. I don't know. It's just a weird thing. I guess you're wearing me down a little bit.
I encourage you to think about it.
No, I will. And it's something that I've always just been like, I'm these are the things I believe in. And I've always kind of thought of it in terms of the two-party system being a bad idea, because the more you break the populace up into parties, you get closer to having an individual party that represents more of your beliefs, right? Because if you carry that out to finality, it gets you to the individual, right? The largest number of parties in America would be 330 million, because each person would be their own party, the party of me. And so that's why I've always kind of thought that way. I have a weird way of thinking about these kind of things, but
for me, it'd have to either be two parties or no parties.
Right. Well,
I don't like the idea of other parties coming in and breaking up either the right or the left.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we both want to get stuff done.
Well, I can see the utility of your argument, the way you laid it out. And I hadn't really thought about it, I guess, as pragmatically as that, to say, like, at the end of the day, if the goal is to get things done, like, for example, what we saw in Virginia, right? And I looked at it as the goalposts all of a sudden shooting to the left, and a lot of people looking around like, what the hell? I thought I was a Democrat, but no way, I'm voting this way. If there had been some other third party, I suppose those people could have, instead of going into the Republicans, for example, and I know that we're just talking voting, they didn't necessarily change their parties, but they could have instead been caught by that third party, and now you don't have the power concentrated on the right to actually get something done, right? So that makes sense, I guess. I'll give you that one.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
The other thing I wanted to talk about, and we opened with this, but you're obviously active on TikTok, and I have abstained from TikTok for the reasons of their association with the CCP. But you made some good points when we talked about the benefits outweighing essentially the negative aspects of it, right? And the fact that you have all this reach and you can talk to all these people, and it's a younger audience, which I think is important if you're getting out a message about politics, right? You want to talk to young people. But then also I was talking to some friends of mine in IT about it, because I've really been on the fence about this, because I anything that I can do to get exposure for the podcast, I'm all for, but I've just held off there. But my buddies in IT were like, dude, they have access to your data in all these platforms. Like if somebody wants your data and they're like a Chinese hacker, they're going to get it. It's like no problem. And I'm
they
like,
have
well,
all of my data.
Yeah.
Everybody has my data.
Well, and I'm like, well, okay, so are my concerns just unfounded with like not wanting to be on TikTok since the CCP has a controlling interest in one of the sister companies and they have a seat at the board and all this stuff? And they're like, yeah, because if your concern is your data, A, like what is your data going to mean to them anyway? But B, they have access to it already. So what are your thoughts on that? I guess, I don't know if you want to expound on that at all.
Yeah, no, totally. So another thing is that you have to understand that Trump was going to shut down TikTok, and he was dead serious about that. Like when Trump says he's going to do something, and that's something I admire about Trump. He does not bullshit. He doesn't put a policy proposal out there that he's not serious about. And so he was dead serious about shutting down TikTok. And so in this new deal, and that makes people come to the bargaining table. They're like, fuck, like, I know I've seen him do this before. I've seen him, like, he is totally open to chaos. But that is effective in people knowing that you're serious when you say you're going to do something. So that brought China to the bargaining table, and it resulted in a deal that would mean that the board of TikTok Global, Americans now have a 4-to-1 majority on the board of TikTok Global. So that's huge, like a majority equity, and I think there's a majority equity holding stipulation in there. I'm not sure about that. Don't quote me on that, but I know on the board there's a majority of American directors. So that's huge. And that definitely should give you some solace. But additionally, even if I thought that the CCP was all over that, the CCP is not making much money off of my TikToks, if any at all. The TikTok is not a heavy advertising platform right now. I think they're more concerned with increasing their users than advertising. It's like with Instagram. Instagram did not used to have every third post on your feed be an advertisement.
Yeah, I remember.
TikTok, I think, is in that similar growth stage where they aren't really using their platform for advertising revenue. I think they're just garnering users. So they aren't really making much money, if any, at all, off of my content, because I don't make anything off of my content. And I'm like, I signed up for the creator fund. The only way you can make money is if people directly send you like gifts, which count for a monetary amount. And even those, of all of the lives I've done, I probably invested at least like 20 hours, probably 30 hours into lives at this point. And I probably made $200. Like that's nothing. Like, I mean, it's fine, but like my time is worth more than that. I do it because I'm passionate about it.
Of course.
And I sure as hell know China isn't making like that much off of me. So with that said, I think that the impact of me having a post that has roughly 120,000 likes and I don't know how many views, like nearly 1 million views, where I'm talking about why universal healthcare and free healthcare is not a right.
Yeah.
Why that's not your right to have free healthcare, because you don't have a right to other people's labor. People need to reevaluate what a right means to them. Like you have natural rights, which are God-given. Those can't be taken away from you. They're inborn, even if you don't believe in God. They're things that are inherent to your dignity as a human being. And then you have like other things that are like called rights and probably should have never been called rights, like your right to an attorney. I'm like, that's a legal right, but that requires someone else's labor. And just because you're a human being doesn't mean that a society magically gets set up before you that has the resources to provide an attorney for you. That is an entitlement and a privilege that you should be grateful for and grateful to this country for. You're grateful for rights, you demand privileges. Or you're grateful for privileges, you demand rights. Right. Sorry, the reverse. So people have come to demand privileges. They demand free healthcare. And I'm like, it's not a right. You don't have a right to other people's labor. So the impact that I see of 120,000 people seeing that, liking it, now having that in their brain to use as a talking point whenever people want to say that healthcare is a right and say that anybody who disagrees with them is evil, then they can turn it on them and be like, no, you're actually the one being selfish because you're saying you have a right to other people's labor. You don't. Like that's the thing. It's like a lot of leftism is about shaming other people for appearing selfish. But the thing that is selfish is being entitled to other people's labor, to being entitled to other people's production. So it's like you reframe these arguments and you plant that seed in a bunch of other like-minded people. And I think that's very powerful. So that's why I love the platform, even though it's censorship central and it has this relationship with the CCP. I see the benefit as outweighing the cost.
Yeah, I've thought a lot since our conversation, and my mind might be changing. We'll see.
Go in. Once you get to 1,000 followers, you can go live, and I'd be happy to co-host to get you some more traction.
Well, we'll have to. We can go live on Instagram sometimes too, and hopefully, I can get you some.
Yeah,
some more followers.
Definitely. Because I'd like to diversify. Because, like I said, like TikTok will cut you out at they cut Conservative Ant off, and his posts are like tongue in cheek, like they're funny. They're never like offensive. Like there's nothing like offensive or egregious about what he does on his platform. And he got permanently banned at 780,000 followers. They do not care what you've built. They don't care who you've reached, who you inspire. They will silence you and cut your tongue out the second they just feel like it. It's totally random almost. Like some people get appeals. Thank God I had an appeal that was available when I got banned. Some people get banned and they don't even have the option to appeal it. And it's devastating. So yeah, I would like to diversify because the second that I get banned from TikTok, I lose a ton of reach. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a convincing argument. I think it's important to, I don't know, you got to look at everything as a, I'm trying to think of a Thomas Sowell quote. I was trying to be witty in the moment, but anyway, everything's a trade-off,
I know
essentially.
What you're talking about.
Yeah.
Where he says, I've never understood why it's selfish for you to want to keep your money and not selfish for you to want to take the money of others for your own causes.
That's
like that.
Yeah. And that gets to the point you were making about the right to healthcare. It's like, well, anything you give to someone, you take from someone else. And I think oftentimes those on the left who are sort of looking at everything through rose-colored glasses forget about the take that has to happen for the give. So anyway.
And they're like, oh, well, they have so much money. They have so much money. And I'm like, why is it that someone who is far more productive has contributed far more to the betterment of humanity? Like Bezos, for example. I'm not the biggest fan. I don't think he's like a be-all, end-all or anything. But he has absolutely revolutionized what it means to be a small business, made so many people be able to make money off of having a small business without having a brick-and-mortar storefront. And he's made goods accessible at lower costs with the same quality to millions upon millions of people. And every single day, it's just churning. People are getting things that's so much easier than they ever were before. It saves transportation costs. It helps the environment. He has done infinitesimally more to benefit humanity than you, who's not you, but the theoretical person,
me as well,
a critic, than like you, who's sitting at home smoking weed all day and complaining. And you want him to do more for this cause. What are you doing in the first place for any of this? Like, it's like, why are you not considered the selfish person for being unproductive in the first place?
Absolutely.
He's done way more already for humanity than you ever will. And you're calling him evil because he doesn't want to contribute more of his wealth towards something you happen to care about.
Yeah. And I experienced kind of a distilled version of that. I owned a company that I sold, and we got to close to 100 employees before I sold it. And, I dealt with
that bar?
Yeah. It's a chain of craft beer bars in North and South Carolina. Yeah, it was crazy how I fell into that. But, spent years building it, and I had a staff of close to 100 people that were like family to me. And something you realize as a small business owner that I think a lot of times is just missed on people is that, like, I created 100 jobs. I created 100 jobs for people. And when my friends would say, when I finally exited, say stuff like must be nice or whatever, never mind the fact that it was years of working 16 to 20 hours a day, not paying myself for years. And like literally I I had a couple of close friends who were bartenders that worked for me that became close friends over time. And I would joke with them and say, you make more than me, right? Because they actually did. I didn't pay myself anything.
Not to mention the huge risk that you took. Like
massive
you aren't
risk.
Even like you did this graduate study. Most people, whenever they've done a graduate study, they feel compelled to use that degree. You're like, okay, I see an opportunity here and I'm going to take advantage, even though it's like not in my field. You probably had some like doubts because you were like, fuck, I'm not even like using this study.
Oh God.
And, like you were taking a huge risk.
Yeah. You take on several types of risk too, right? Because it takes a huge outlay of capital to get started that I worked for years saving up in a corporate job. But nonetheless, I mean, if the company doesn't make money, the employees still get paid. I just, I'm the last one paid, right? So, but anyway, my point to them would always be like, that the good that it did, the jobs that it created, that was the part that was just always like, it didn't make sense to people because you're demonized as like the boss, the whatever, the greedy capitalist. And it's like, dude, I created something that gave 100 people jobs so that they could feed their, themselves and or their families and put a shelter over their heads. Like, what did you do? Did you give 100 people jobs? I don't think you did. So like, it would always drive me nuts. And it's like, for whatever reason, that connection is never made, that you create something that then goes on to, and look, there are certainly some issues with the working conditions within Amazon that I think need to be addressed in terms of like timing bathroom breaks and all this crazy stuff.
Agreed.
And having delivery drivers piss in a bottle, but nonetheless, he's creating all this opportunity for people, and it infuriates you when you see, like you said, the guy sitting at home smoking weed, just complaining about everything, not being productive, right? And another thing that it's like they just don't realize is that if we were to convert to a system that's not capitalism, so socialism, there's no incentive to create. There's no incentive to innovate. There's no incentive to build anything. So all of these people who do these things that you hate and you demonize, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson or whoever. And look, I have my issues with all of these people, but you can't deny the fact that they've created. I mean, Elon is single-handedly like changing multiple industries and making us an interplanetary species.
Exactly. So, like, who else is going to get us interplanetary?
Right. like
not NASA. Like, they're freaking inefficient as hell.
Dude,
and it's because they're funded by the government.
Exactly.
They don't have a profit incentive to be efficient. And people don't realize also how small margins are. Like on especially in the food industry, like it's like 10 to 20%, like is going to be your profit margin. So you're taking a huge risk investing all of this capital. And even if your revenues are, say, I don't know, 500 grand at 10%, that's 50 grand. Like people don't realize how much you have to do to be a successful business owner. And there's a reason why capitalism rewards the ownership of capital and that risk taking, because it is so risky and so few are willing to do it. Otherwise, it wouldn't achieve such high wages when it's successful. You don't see the failed business people. You don't see the people whose finances were ruined by their risk taking. You only see the success stories, and everybody just gets bitter and jealous and envious of those people. And it's like, you also have to understand that in capitalism, or capitalism-like societies, these people are choosing these jobs because they provide the best opportunity that they saw in front of them. Nobody is being forced to do these things.
Exactly.
And it's like whenever people criticize, I read a book in undergrad called like The Journey of a T-Shirt. And it had this long chapter called like Better Than the Farm. And it was talking about China and the industrialization of China and lifting, I think they had like 700 million people living in extreme poverty. I think in like, it was over like 10 years. They reduced it to like 7 million roughly.
Yeah, it's
is
crazy.
where it's at today. And that's like less than $2 a day. An astounding accomplishment for the betterment of these people's well-being. But people still will lambast all of these companies for taking advantage of that cheap labor because the conditions are abhorrent for what we're used to in the US. But their conditions on rice paddies in southern China were far worse. They didn't have access to healthcare, any public services. Those conditions were far worse. Otherwise, they wouldn't have voluntarily migrated to cities. And you're still seeing this great migration into cities in China because the opportunities there are still better. You cannot bring people from a state of destitute existence straight to an American standard of living. And people call it a human rights violation when they don't see an American standard of living on the other side of a company's supply chain, when they don't realize that that's not a practical like expectation to have. And it's also like, if we did expect that and we did provide that, think of how few companies would do that in China because it would be so expensive and unreasonable to do so. These things have to happen gradually or they won't happen at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. People are just so out of touch with things that they're quick to criticize, and business ownership is one of the biggest ones. I mean, it's just,
what is
business ownership? Just people who haven't done it or who haven't worked intimately in that world. They don't get it, and it's like, owning a small business is so much more work than working a job. Like, it's so much more. And people just don't, I don't know. And I could rant about that forever, but along those lines,
my parents are small business owners,
yes.
like I said.
Yeah. So you get
that had a huge impact on like my whole worldview.
Yeah. And you studied economics, right? So you're, yeah, that's why you started going into margins and all this other stuff. I was this guy knows a little bit. Well, my friend, we've been going, I think, an hour and a half or close to it now.
Yeah.
I think we could definitely do this again. There's tons of things I would still love to discuss with you.
Sure.
But I wanted to get you on because we did have a good exchange in our messages. And I think it's an important message to get out there, specifically that you, as a gay Republican, the backlash you get from the tolerant left. And
definitely.
I hope that this will be beneficial to at least one person out there who is.
I hope so too. That's the whole mission. To destigmatize, normalize, and just make society normal again.
Whatever that is. But I usually like to wrap up with first-time guests on a question. And that question is, if you could give one piece of advice to young people today, age 17 to 22, maybe even think about advice you would give to your younger self, what would that be?
The biggest guiding light for me all of my life has been adherence to my authentic self. It's why whenever I was in 7th grade and I felt like Christianity wasn't my thing anymore, I was like, okay, I'm an atheist now. And then I questioned that. I was like, okay, I actually think God could be a thing. And then I was agnostic. And then I was like, okay, I believe in God, actually. There are too many beautiful occurrences and like kind of coincidences that happen in life for me to not believe in a God. So now I believe in God. And same thing with coming out of the closet at 13 years old in 2010, small town Georgia. Same thing with coming out as a Republican. It has been my guiding light since the beginning, and it'll be a much more difficult path because you will constantly make enemies. But nobody who has done substantial things in this world has not made substantial enemies along the way. Anybody who acts with conviction will not have mass appeal. That's highly unlikely, at least, that they'll have mass appeal. So I encourage everybody to act authentically, be your authentic self, because the friends, quote unquote, friends that you'll lose along the way were never your friends for who you were, but for who they wanted you to be. And all of the enemies you'll make, the arguments you'll have will only strengthen your individuality and make you figure out more and more who you are as a person and strengthen your character. So that's been my guiding light for happiness. And I've never regretted for even one decision where I was making a decision to stick to my guns and stick to my values, even if it's resulted in some crazy backlash like this thing has. I've never regretted it. And I think it's one of the biggest, most important things you can do for achieving a sense of purpose and happiness in life.
Boom. That's beautiful and spot on. And I couldn't agree more with how I've done things in my life. And sometimes it requires walking away from things and from people and from ideas, but that's okay. And I love it, my friend. People can find you at Current Vince on all platforms.
Yes, on Instagram and TikTok. Okay. And I have a Twitter, but I do not use it anymore because I'm just like, Twitter sucks. I'm just not interested in it. But yeah, it's at Current Vince, like current events, but event, Current Vince at Current Vince on TikTok and Instagram.
Right on. And I'll put it in the description on the video and on all the audio versions and everything, so folks will be able to find you. Look, man, I appreciate your time. I know you got some other stuff to get to, like the gym and everything, so I'll let you go. But it was an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for the time and bringing me on your platform. I appreciate it. Admire your work.
Absolutely. Well, likewise. And I'm going to highly consider TikTok now. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm glad I could potentially convert you. We need more on the conservative talk over there.
Yeah, we'll see. If I do, it'll probably be banned pretty soon, but I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, man. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks again.
Yeah.